Welcome to Angels, Demons, and the Apocalypse. Jimmy, you're still alive.
I'm alive. I'm alive and kicking.
You're alive? You're kicking even.
I'm kicking. I'm ready to kick down the door and get out of my house. So I'm doing okay. I'm doing fine.
Yeah. How long have we been, how long have we not had services for? Church services, worship services.
That is a good question.
What, do we stop March the 22nd or something like that? I think I had it the 15th.
Yeah.
So March the 22nd, the 29th.
We've been the exact same as you guys.
Okay, so all of April.
Yeah.
So we haven't had church worship service. Now, we've been doing it online just like everybody else.
A lot better than nothing.
Yeah.
A lot better.
But we haven't had church worship services for about 6 or 7 weeks.
It's
that's crazy.
It's crazy. It's bizarre. If you had told me a year ago that you didn't tell me the details, you just said in a year you're not going to have church for 2 months.
Yeah.
I would have, and you had to guess the scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I could have even guessed what was going on.
Now we're looking to get back together May 10th.
That's
Lord willing.
Yeah.
That's Mother's Day. That's a great day to get back together.
It is.
Lord willing, everything, all the different orders are relinquished and whatnot.
Yes.
We're looking to get back May 10th and still have some, social distancing practices for you that are concerned. We're still going to be doing some things, but wow.
It's a bizarre time. It's just a bizarre time.
And this is our 5th edition of Angels, Demons, and the Coronapocalypse.
It is.
And so we've got to revisit with somebody today who's been our guest before. Just really enjoyed having him. And I got some extra questions because we talked about some things about this Coronapocalypse, the coronavirus, and the issues that are going on right now. And so we've got Josh Wright back with us. Welcome, Josh.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me back on. I'm really seeing it as an honor to be the first member of your Two Timers Club.
That's right.
It is prestigious. It is a prestigious honor.
Yeah, when you get invited back twice to a show called Angels, Demons, and the Apocalypse.
Put it on your resume. Great to have you, Josh. Do you want to mention as a disclaimer? I know last time you made a disclaimer. I just thought of this, but do you need to give a little disclaimer before you answer any questions again?
Well, sure. Just any opinions are my own. They're not the opinions of the state of Kansas, obviously.
Hey, Josh, why do you think it's important to hold a limited government even right now? And what is limited government? What's your view? If someone came up to you and say, why would you believe in limited government? And then we'll talk about why we think it's important now to kind of hold to that. What would you say to someone who just came up and say, why would you hold to a limited government? What is that kind of? Just help us out a little bit.
Well, I think if you're talking about limited government in the realm of civil liberties, I think that's even a little different than talking about limited government in the realm of economics.
Right.
As far as civil liberties, that's just what our country is founded upon. We have religious liberty. We have, we have certain freedoms that we all hold dear, and for the government to come in and make judgments for us about how we should live our lives or how frequently we ought to practice our religion is problematic. I think when you get off into the realm of economics, though, I think there are just simply laws of economics that a more laissez-faire, limited government approach to the economy, I think it just has the best chances of distributing resources appropriately and promoting good investment in good businesses, as opposed to malinvestment where the government's choosing winners and losers. So, maybe you can go into a little more detail. As far as,
and that's an excellent, just right off the bat. What are we concerned? Why are we concerned about? I mean, I am, and I think we all have a little concern that we keep a limited government.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm saying yes. I don't want them overreaching during these times. I think I have a fear. I don't know about a fear. I believe God's in control, so I don't want to go too far with that. But there is a concern that government will take advantage of the situation And so last time we talked about having a proper trust of our elected officials, but it seems like we also need to have a healthy, not unhealthy, but a healthy mistrust of some things, and to say, I don't want government coming in, and especially during this time of hurt and pain and whatever, pestilence, coming in and sweeping in and saying, well, we got to do all these things. We got to make life better for everybody.
I think even since we last spoke, we've had some pretty significant changes,
right,
in where we stand. The governor issued the executive order that was designed to keep churches from meeting on Easter. It specifically targeted churches, which I think was very problematic. The Kansas Supreme Court heard the case immediately by video conferencing and issued an opinion that day, and of course supported what the governor wanted to do. It was based on a technicality because the full legislature hadn't come into session and actually taken action on her executive order. But I think that's problematic. If people can go to the grocery store, or people can go to various businesses that are deemed essential, let's be honest, that there are lots of businesses that, and I'm not saying they ought not be open, but there's certainly a lot of businesses that I think you can argue are less essential than someone being able to go and practice their religion.
Right.
And large numbers of people are congregating. And I think that's just troubling that the governor was targeting religion in that way. So.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but I think that what I'm worried is for people who are for more government regulation, more government laws or standards about what we can and can't do. I'm afraid that they'll use these times to push their agenda even more. And of course, I guess they'll use any time to push their agenda. I guess I shouldn't be afraid of that. They're always going to be pushing their agenda.
Well, you know what, though? I think you've got a good point. If you look back to the Great Depression, that's when a lot of different laws were passed that set the stage for a lot of these social welfare programs that we're dealing with now.
And just so people don't think we're uncaring, because after all, Jimmy and I are pastors.
Yes.
It's not like that we don't think that people should have charity, and people should have, and realize that people go through difficult times, and realize that people need help. We would very much agree with that. In fact, both Jimmy and I have funds in our church specifically to help our people that are struggling through things. But I think a lot of times what you're talking about too, Josh, is just personal responsibility and the lack of that.
Exactly.
And I'll never forget, Josh visited with our church and came to our church here for a little bit, and he was going to one of the classes that we had. It was a classes on budgeting, and money and so forth. And Josh, I'll never forget this because you then took over the class and we're teaching it for a bit. And one of the things Josh said to me is, I don't want to tell you how to run your classes or your ministry, he said, but I would at least charge folks a little bit for the kit, because the kit was like $110, $115.
Yeah.
And he's like, I would at least charge them something, because then it makes them take it more seriously and they're more committed, more involved to come. Yes. I'll never forget when you told me that, Josh, and I just think that the idea that we need to take a little more personal responsibility, that also helps us with personal liberty.
Absolutely. And, I think the old expression is that it's important for people to have skin in the game. And if you're a taxpayer, it's much more important to you about how the government is actually allocating those resources if you're having to write a check. And I know that Mitt Romney got into a lot of trouble back in 2012, if you remember, when he pointed out that a large amount of people don't pay any taxes, and it makes it a little easier if you don't have that skin in the game to say, well, if I haven't had to foot the bill, why shouldn't the government, redistribute wealth? Why shouldn't the government overextend itself when it doesn't actually even have the money, and it's printing the money and it's borrowing the money from foreign countries? Why not allow them to cut checks to people, and we'll worry about how to pay for it later. But I think when you're a taxpayer, I think when you're somebody who's invested, it's certainly something that's more on your mind about how the government's going to use those resources and to what extent they're going to be involved in your life.
And what would be your answer to someone who says, well, I mean, if the government's going to help people from dying or help people from going through difficulty, then that's good?
Well, Pastor, I don't think the government has an obligation to help people. I think people have an obligation to help people.
That is good.
And if you think about it, the government is really just a middleman. It doesn't actually produce anything. It doesn't produce any wealth. Any money that the government has to give, it has, again, either been printed out of thin air, or it has been taxed and has been redistributed through force of law. And so I don't think that that's a moral way to handle suffering in our country right now. I think that charities, I think voluntary giving is what we ought to be looking at.
Right.
Yep, exactly. I think earlier, Josh, you mentioned that you thought that our economic system was designed in such a way to be the most sustainable, the most, with the capitalistic system we have, not socialism. It's more sustainable. And the thing is that if there become more takers than givers, it's just not sustainable. It's just not going to last long term. It may last 10 years or 20 or 30, but if you keep going down that route,
well, and
it's not sustainable.
You just think about it this way. I've got 5 kids. So if my wife is the most practical person on the planet. So if my kids come to me and say, Dad, I'd like this. Okay. Dad, I like this. Okay. My wife's like, no, you can't keep doing that. You don't make enough money. Well, that's okay. Dad, give me this. Okay.
Yeah.
And I just keep doing that. There's got to be a point where that stops. Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
A day of reckoning.
It's going to happen. And it's not so great for my kids because they just come to me.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, hey, you know what? You want that? Go out and work for it.
Yeah.
And see if you can get it.
Yeah.
And so that's the way it's explained to me. And Josh, right now, I mean, something's going to give at some point. I mean, we're bailing out from this last stimulus package. We're giving like $300 billion to the post office, which is not going to make money anytime soon, and has thousands, if not more than that, employees that we're going to continue to bail out because they're not going to make any kind of money, even in the future here with the digital age. And so it's like there's some things that are going to give. And again, we love postal workers. One of my dearest friends, a postal worker. I'm not trying to say it. I'm just trying to say us sustaining all of these things is not going to happen for a while.
Not realistic.
Not realistic.
That's right. And, I think that human nature is to try to avoid pain.
Sure.
And
sure, of course. Yeah, no question.
And it's easy for me to say because I've still got my employment.
Right.
You guys both still have your employment.
You're right.
True. Very true.
And but I will tell you that I suffered through the Great Recession when I had just graduated from college, and so I've experienced some pain, and it's no fun.
No, you're right.
It is no fun to not be able to find a job when you need one. But I think that if the government took a more limited role in all this, and if they tried to allow the market to correct itself, I think that the pain would be for a much shorter duration than what it will be if the government continues to try to manipulate the markets and continues to try to prevent us from experiencing any pain. It just kind of kicks the can down the road, delays the inevitable. And
that's what we will do, don't you think, Josh? We will. I mean, even with President Trump, who we can say we respect, not respect, however you feel about him. I mean, we respect him here, but I think he's going to try to kick the can down the road a little bit.
Oh, exactly. And I think the United States, just by virtue of the size of our economy, and I think the quality of our people, we've had an excellent line of credit, because the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. Countries are willing to buy our treasuries. They're willing to lend us money. They're willing to allow us to kind of get away with this excess government and excess living that we've had now for, a few decades. And that's maybe been it seemed like a blessing at times for us, because we have been able to bail people out and prevent some pain. But I think ultimately, like you were talking about in personal finance, if you are not saving and if you're spending above your means, there will be a day of reckoning. You might be able to get a new credit card and do a balance transfer a few times and keep it going, but ultimately there's going to be a time where you can't get that other credit card, you can't do that balance transfer, and you're in a really bad financial pinch. You're either, cutting your lifestyle back dramatically, or you're maybe even filing for bankruptcy, depending on how bad the problem has gotten. So I certainly hope that our government can come to its senses. I'm not terribly optimistic of this, but I hope that they can come to their senses and stop kicking the can down the road. And even if it means some short-term pain, I think it'll be much less pain than if we continue to snowball this problem.
Interesting.
It's a tough spot. That is very good points, Josh. It's a tough spot that President Trump's in, because he's coming up on, when's the re-election? Not too much. Well,
2020. Yeah.
So it's just a tough spot, because and he has, to me, he has shown that he has shown to be principled in ways, making stands on things that aren't popular. But this is a difficult spot, because if he does do the tough love route and kind of, just as you mentioned, which is, I believe, is so accurate, which I think is what needs to be done, he'll also become in the short term probably unpopular in some ways.
Yeah.
It's just a tough spot to be in for him.
That's the real question too, Josh. Will there be people who stand up and say we've got to do this, and could those people ever get elected?
Well, that's exactly right. That is not a popular platform to run on. Fiscal restraint. And we talked about Calvin Coolidge a little bit last time, in the last podcast, and he was the great refrainer, and that probably just wouldn't play in these times. And pastors, you can help me with this. I believe this is biblical, but I think it's a proverb. No discipline is pleasant at the time,
right.
But
yes.
Finish that for me if you would.
It yields much fruit in its season, yeah.
Hebrews 12.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
And I think that certainly applies in personal finance, and I think it could apply to our government as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Interesting.
That's right.
Well, this stimulus package has happened. I received a stimulus package in my account, and it's happened. And this PPP, Paycheck Protection Program that you talked about last time, Josh, it seemed like when the government runs stuff like this, it just becomes a real mess. It's already gotten some issues that people have. I've got friends that are small business owners that have already had some issues with it, and I'm not saying it's not going to work out, and it might work out fine, but I know that even respectable people like Ramsey and others have said, don't take this. We're not sure what this is going to mean down the road, and so.
That's exactly right, and when the government does get involved in the economy and in employment situations, it creates all kinds of really weird outcomes that you don't want and that were unintended. Like, for example, what I am hearing is that you have employers that are securing these loans, and their employees are frustrated when they learn that the employer has the loan and wants them back at work, because the employee realizes, or the former employee realizes, they could actually make more money doing much less and being at home collecting unemployment.
I know.
And And that's just what happens when the government gets involved. You have all kinds of weird outcomes like that no one really thought through. And what's tough too is that I believe these PPP loans, they are keyed off of whether you let any employees go.
Right.
And if you do try to get everyone to come back, and they don't want to come back because they're making more on unemployment, what happens then?
Right.
Do you have to go through an audit? Do you have to demonstrate that you tried to get this person to come back to work? And they've created an incentive to hire people back, but at the same time, they've got this other incentive for people to not want to go back to work, at least for any time soon. And that's just with, the current stimulus. Who knows what will happen if some of these bills that we're hearing about in the U.S. House come to pass, where people are receiving like basically a universal basic income of, $2,000 per month per adult.
Right.
And who's gonna want to go back to work then?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. This is really radically changing gears, but while we have you on the line, Josh, there's a question I have. I saw recently where I was warned through a Christian legal organization that the governor was sending out, I don't know if it was affidavits or something that different churches were to sign related to the stay-home order. Have you heard of anything like that? And I was warned not to sign anything like that. Does that ring any bells at all?
I have not heard anything about that. Did you actually receive an affidavit, or was it just the warning you received?
Just a warning email saying if your church that it was going on, and if you received something, basically they were advising me not to sign it. So anyway, I know it's a random shift, but it's something I thought of this week, and I don't know anything more about it, but I didn't know if you had heard anything about that.
I have not heard anything about it. I think if in fact that's true that those are being sent out, I think it's probably good advice not to sign it. I guess it would depend on what's in the affidavit.
Yeah.
But no, that would certainly seem to be, a major overextension of the governor's authority. I don't think the governor can force someone to sign an affidavit.
Yeah.
And also, Josh, then you're worried about if the progressives do get in government, like, we are a pretty conservative state, but we have a Democratic governor and quite progressive, and then we have other progressives. I'm not saying Trump can't win election again. I think he can, but, if we do have progressives take over again, government, and they get in control of the Senate and the House and take over the presidency, who's to say they don't change those PPP loans to saying, oh, well, you do now, you churches do now have to meet a certain standard, or, you do now have to accept certain agendas.
Well, and that's what Dave Ramsey has been warning about on his radio show, is that just because that's not in the law now doesn't mean that the rules can't be changed dramatically later on. And so, yes, I think that's another reason. I mean, it's not set in stone that
Sure.
your church would remain free to, adopt unpopular positions in your statement of faith. I think that could be changed, and I think anytime you welcome the government into your church or into your business, you open yourself up to their control.
Right.
And so, yes, I think that's another reason, beyond just the possibility that you're actually, in fact, taking on debt rather than a grant. I think that's another reason, is you don't want to even open yourself up to the government having that kind of authority in your church.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, we've talked about angels, demons in the apocalypse here, and we talked last time that this isn't necessarily the sign of an end times, but I tell you what, and though while you and I are not conspiracy theorists, Josh, at all, there is some interesting talk about some things that you could see a one world emperor, one world person being in charge of.
Yes.
And you could see some things even taking shape now that would lead us to that path, and maybe that's God's plan. Maybe that's God's purpose. I'm not saying it's not. God puts in charge. We believe He is sovereign. God puts in places those whom He deems to put into places, and He's in control. But it is interesting. You were talking some about this digital coin. Can you Elaborate on that. Digital currency, excuse me.
Digital dollar. And, and I'm not terribly familiar with Bitcoin or what its current application is, but cryptocurrency is something that everyone's been talking about. And it's kind of like a hedge against the dollar if the dollar starts to lose its value. I think central governments are going to try to restrict something like Bitcoin from becoming that prevalent, and I think that
it's because they don't own it, man.
Exactly. Well, yeah, you can't manipulate the currency if it's something that if the government doesn't have that kind of control over. So, what was actually in this stimulus bill that was passed back in March at first was the creation of a digital dollar, and what would happen is every American would receive a digital wallet. And you would essentially have an account with the Federal Reserve, who issues our money, and there are people in the Trump administration that have been tasked with trying to develop this digital currency. And right now, I'm sure they have good intentions for the most part.
Sure.
They're trying to think about ways to keep up with other countries,
sure.
to try to make transactions more seamless and bring us into the 21st century. But it's troubling to me, the idea of just having a digital currency that you can't just go down and withdraw money, have a little bit of anonymity about how you're spending your money, and for the government to have the ability to trace your purchases to that extent, I think is scary. China has just implemented a digital currency, and I was watching a guy, I think it was on CNBC the other day. He was being interviewed, and he does a lot of business in China, and he said he was trying to buy a hot dog from a hot dog stand over there. He was trying to hand them cash, and they would not accept the cash. And ultimately, they just gave him the hot dog because you have to use digital currency now. Now, that was just anecdotal, so I don't know if that truly is completely implemented in China, but I think we all know the Chinese government's communist. They're going to be trying to use the currency to control people, to monitor their purchases. And I think that's a little scary that with a few keystrokes, somebody could have their complete access to all their savings just completely cut off from them, and there's no way to even give that person money. You can't go down and withdraw $100 and give it to someone if everything is digital. So,
right.
Yeah, that is scary, I think.
Well, and like you say, God has a plan, and I don't think we need to be walking around in fear. But at the same time, I think it's important we have our eyes open, and in a crisis situation like this, something like a digital dollar creation is not something that most Americans are really paying that close of attention to, because everyone's more concerned about getting their stimulus check or their job or something like that. Whereas I think the digital dollar probably would have a lot more scrutiny put on it if these were normal times. I think people would be asking those questions. But when I came across that story, and I found out that not only was that something proposed in the last stimulus bill and it was withdrawn at the last minute, but that's something that in one of these House bills, this Emergency Money for the People Act that you've heard about, same authors, same members of Congress that drafted the CARES Act, they're talking about having that in this next round of stimulus potentially, where they're going to try to bail states out and things. So you might just watch for that.
Yeah, and who would be in charge of that? Would the central bank would that be something that they would kind of be in charge of, or?
Absolutely, yeah. I think your digital dollar account would be through the Federal Reserve. And,
okay.
The administration of Trump administration official who's kind of in charge of exploring these things, he was even suggesting trying to pay federal employees in digital dollars if this was created. So my point is, just be aware of that.
Yeah.
And if in fact you hear about that, if that's troubling, you might consider writing your member of Congress and expressing concerns about it. And but yeah, just something to kind of keep your eye on, and it's just kind of one of those things that they've considered sliding into some of these stimulus packages,
right?
Because don't really care about.
Because even businesses are saying, no, don't give me. I don't want to handle money with this coronavirus. Just give me a card, or give me your card over the phone, or something like that.
Or a mark. No,
and I realize that we're largely a cashless society right now.
Sure.
with our debit cards, but at least your money is in a local credit union or a local bank. It would be more concerning to me if it was actually an account maintained by the Federal Reserve.
Right.
It was actually a government entity that was holding onto your money and had the control and the ability to review your purchases. I think right now, if the government wanted to know how you were spending your money, they'd have to get a warrant, go down to the bank, and demonstrate a legal cause for why they needed to get those records. But obviously, if you have the Federal Reserve and that's where your account is, they don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to me as we're talking about this. We don't need to be in fear. God's in control, and we don't know the time frame, but when those scriptures about the end were written so long ago about the mark of the beast, the one world currency, all these things that might have seemed bizarre or believable, but just different. But you can see how things are moving in that direction.
It's very interesting.
It's going to happen.
And who says we need a chip in our hand? We all have a chip in our hand. It's called our smartphone. It's in our hand all the time, and it's already traceable. It's already. Facebook knows my suggestions. When I talk to my wife about something, I see an ad on Facebook on it the very next thing.
Yes, I think they literally listen to at least your phone calls, because I've seen that as well.
It's a crazy thing, and so I've got and again, I'm not a normally paranoid. We're not conspiracy theorist guys, but it is interesting that you see these talked about and bandied about, and you can see how someone could say, hey, you don't follow the way we follow things. You don't hold to the values we hold to. You don't commit to the things that we commit to. Then you'll be out of medical care. You'll be out of buying and selling. You won't get a license through us for your business, whatever.
Yeah, unless you're a cant.
Unless,
And then I do computer programming as well, and I query databases, and you can see where if someone had a log of all your audio calls, you could just run a query for the word Jesus, for instance, in someone's audio and their internet searches, and you could have a list of people that were saying keywords. You could create a Christian target list. Anyway, like I say, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. You just see how this technology could be used to.
And we're thankful for technology.
Yeah,
we're thankful for technology. We're thankful for vaccines. We're thankful for people coming up with new ways to handle things.
Technology is not bad.
It's that commitment. It will be the commitment to this one that over Christ, over Jesus Christ. That will be the key.
Mark.
Yeah, that's the mark. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not the chip or whatever it is. It's the fealty to this leader over Jesus.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. One other thing I want to talk about, Josh, and that is this troubling thing about this Harvard magazine about the homeschooling. This gal saying that homeschooling is basically child abuse because it's done by conservative Christian parents mostly, and they're passing on their, Christian faith. And that they should have a license. Again, it's going back to, you have to have a license for this. You have to have, this is the way that they seem to want to, get us to, the progressives. And when I say they, I mean the progressives give us a license in order to do it. And that way we have to comply with some sort of idea. And, this whole idea is, it's almost like there's going to be a great divide in our country here. Between this progressive that said, because we think, when I think of child abuse, I think of this drag queen story hour.
Yeah, I agree.
I think of this gender transition. I think that's child abuse.
It is.
And they're saying that child abuse is homeschooling because, we pass on our conservative Christian faith and this type of idea, this new article out in Harvard magazine. And it's just, it's just getting to be, I don't know, it can be discouraging. Again, we believe God's in control, and we're going to continue with our faith. But what's your feelings on that?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think, all of the people that I know who were homeschooled, I think they came out very well adjusted. Now, yes, they came out with principles that they may or may not have had if they had gone to the public schools. I think it's a right of a parent to raise their child in the way that they see fit. I do think the government has an interest if a child is not receiving any sort of education.
Sure.
But I think the overwhelming majority of parents that make that decision to homeschool are probably investing in a good curriculum, or they are developing a curriculum for their child. And I would be interested to see the statistics of college entrance exams. And I bet that homeschool children probably do as well, if not a lot better, on entrance exams as opposed to public school children.
I've heard that. I've actually heard that is true, Josh. I have heard some stats on that, actually, by the way. Go ahead, sorry.
And Jimmy, you and I are both products of the public school system there in Clearwater. I thought it was a good education. There's a lot of wasted time. There are a lot of classes, really, that probably were not necessary. And I'm afraid that the public school at times turns into more of a glorified daycare center, just a place for kids to go during the day so that the parents can be at work. And whereas if you have kids who are homeschooled, I think parents are probably in a better position to actually use the time and the resources more efficiently. And some children don't learn well if they're in a classroom for 8 hours a day. It may be that you can pack what you need to teach that child into 3 or 4 hours a day and do other activities the rest of the time. So I like the idea of parents having flexibility, and I know it's a little off topic, but I also would like the ability of parents to have an option to put their children with a school voucher into a private school, or even another public school or a magnet school.
Yes.
Something that is more customizable to their child. I think that's really a shame that we're just limited by geographically where we live. And if you happen to be somebody that lives in a place without a good school, that you're stuck there. And if you don't have the resources to pay the private school tuition, and if you don't have the know-how to homeschool your child or invest in a good curriculum, that your child is just stuck. I think we need to give parents more options. And I think homeschooling, if you're a parent that can do that and you can keep your child focused and learning, I think that's an outstanding way to educate your child.
Well, you said earlier, Keith, where you were comparing the drag queen reading to kids and this just really horrible stuff that's going on with the progressives attacking homeschool families who are, in general, teaching their kids well, Christian values,
right,
doing a good job. It reminds me of this verse in Isaiah 5 where it says, "What sorrow for those who say that evil is good and good is evil, the dark is light and light is dark, the bitter is sweet and sweet is bitter." Now we have that in our country where what's right has become wrong, and what's wrong has become right. Because that's an example where it's appalling that a person can dress up as a woman, a man, and teach young people. That's appalling.
Yeah,
it should be appalling.
It should be appalling.
But it's seen as almost like a
celebration
versus conservative Christian family
who would keep their kids home.
Teaching them biblical principles and homeschooling them. Is seen as the bad guy. It's just a total reversal.
And that's what this gal in this Harvard magazine basically said, was that it's basically abuse and the government needs to start doing something about it, and they should be licensed by some sort of government entity. This whole idea of creationism. If you teach your kid creationism, scientists say that's child abuse. Or if you teach your kids that there's a God, it's just again, it's just more of this progressive left. And to be honest, I see it really. It's really going to divide our country here.
It is.
I know we talked about pain in the long run, in the short term or in the long run as far as economics, but I think this philosophical divide too, Josh, is going to be something that's going to be an interesting thing here in the next 10 to 12 years.
Absolutely, and I think you're right. I think that there are people with social agendas, and they really don't want the parents to have control over the children's learning. And I think it's important that even in a homeschool setting, that kids be exposed to different ideas.
Sure.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with understanding what the secular world says happened that caused the earth to come into being.
Sure.
But I think the progressives would really like for just their side to be presented,
Of course.
and to not have creationism presented. And
Of course.
whereas I think most Christians would like to be informed of both perspectives, and we want to be free to choose our faith and believe what the Bible says.
Which is what an open discussion of topic is. It's let's present all the sides and look and see what makes sense.
Very, very good point. Yes.
And I think it's a shame too that a lot of society sees Christianity as being closed-minded. I've actually met so many Christians that are certainly open to different perspectives. They're
Sure.
grounded in their principles, but they're not people who are wanting to manipulate information or restrict the free exchange of ideas. And so I think a lot of those concerns that kids aren't going to be exposed to all kinds of different perspectives is just unfounded.
Yeah.
And I think most parents would do that, even though the parent would teach those principles to their child and would instill those values. I think they'll probably still expose them to lots of different ideas.
Our biggest concern is not politics here, though I think politics plays a part in our everyday life, and I think that we need to go out, and because we're Americans, we get to have a voice in our government. And as Christians, we need to go out and have a voice. I don't think politics is going to decide everything. I don't think it's going to really even... I'm not sure how much help it's going to be in the end, but we want to just say, hey, if you're concerned for these things, as Josh encouraged us, talk to your elected official, write a letter, call the line, call their office and say, hey, this is where we stand on these things. I don't think that's an unchristian thing to do. I think we can have a voice in our government, and we can be a part and express those things. I love America. I love that we can have the open, the freedom to talk about other ideas and the openness to speak on other ideas. And the progressive left seems to want to close that off. That if there's anything to do with Judeo-Christian values, just keep your mouth shut,
It's funny how it's called progressive, because really they're just going back to old ways it's leading to old ways of constraint and oppression.
Yeah.
Where they're closing down freedoms.
Right.
It's just interesting.
Yeah.
I guess it's progressing towards a new level of control.
And I've often said, man, even if I don't agree with a person, I'm gonna fight for their right for them to speak on whatever they need to speak about. Yeah. That's how strongly I feel about freedom of speech. And the one thing I don't want is a government official or a government person coming in and telling us what we can and cannot say in our churches. And so,
yes. Amen.
Well, thank you, Josh Wright.
Thank you both.
And
you, Josh.
Had some good conversation, some good stuff to think about. And join us next time on our next episode of Angels, Demons, and hopefully not the Coronapocalypse. See you guys later. Blessings.